Hello, and welcome to the Destinations podcast. I'm your host, Doni Aldine, and today we are here at the beautiful Marriott Signature Hotel, the Elizabeth Hotel in Fort Collins, Colorado. It's an amazing venue. Make sure you check it out. Today we are filming in the Ram Suite, and we couldn't be happier. Make sure that you check out the Elizabeth and all of Marriott's signature hotels at theelizabethhotel.com. Welcome to another edition of the Destinations podcast. I'm your host, Doni Aldine, and today we're here with Rebekah Drumsta, who is a trauma expert. She is head of NPE, which stands for Not Parent Expected. So we'll talk about her journey to finding out about her parentage, her background through DNA, as well as her expertise and how that folds in. It's going to be an amazing discussion, and I can't wait to share. Hi, Rebekah.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
Fantastic.
It's beautiful here today.
The
weather's great.
Yes. So you flew in. Where did you fly in from?
I live in Texas, towards the Houston area.
Towards Houston. So was it hot and humid there?
Always.
Okay. Well, it is a beautiful day out. Somebody told me that it was gray this morning, but blue sky, beautiful fluffy clouds, and we are in the beautiful Ram Suite of, I know, isn't this hotel amazing?
It's pretty cool.
It's one of my favorites in the world, if you could believe that. I've been to many. This is one of my favorites.
Wow, that's saying something.
Yes. So I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
I am looking forward to finding out more about your journey. So we met through NPE Network, so Not Parent Expected. Tell us a little bit about what that means, NPE.
NPE means Not Parent Expected, as you've said. So that means that as an adult, somehow, usually now through DNA testing, you discover that mom or dad isn't actually your mom or dad. Yeah. And maybe the person you've been told your whole life, or someone you just grew up thinking, or the person who raised you, but you make this discovery as an adult and go, oh no, this isn't my dad. This isn't my mom. Now what do I do? And so that's why we have NPE Network. That's why it was founded, to help people with this discovery navigate all the big things, the emotions, the family dynamics, all the things that happen after you make this discovery. We're there just as a support to help you walk through this journey.
And what's great about that, it's great on two different levels. So this season on the Destinations podcast, we're talking to entrepreneurs. So this led you to creating the NPE Network. So that's an entrepreneurial venture.
It was actually founded by Catherine St. Clair.
Oh, okay.
She made that discovery that she was an NPE, that her father was not her biological father, the man who raised her. And so she started a support group on Facebook.
Yes.
And then that morphed into this nonprofit. And about a year and a half ago, she stepped down. I've been part of this whole thing from the very beginning, and I stepped into that role, helping lead us forward. And
okay, that's good to know. I thought you had started it. I knew you were there from the beginning.
From the beginning, yep.
Your story is going to be such an important part of this, but the entrepreneurial journey as well, which is one of the things you and I have been discussing. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about your NPE story as well. But first, let's talk about your background. So tell me, I know you're a trauma specialist.
Are we sure we want to go there?
I think so.
All
I
right.
think it's important. So I know you're a trauma specialist. So tell us how you got into that, and then how, the journey through that and how that helps in what you do now with NPE Network.
Awesome. Well, the truth of the matter is I was raised inside a religious cult. And I didn't understand. I had my culture, and that's all I knew in the United States. And then when I became an adult, I realized I didn't fit anywhere else. My lens of the world, what I'd been told, what I thought it was, my experience of it from within our little bubble, it didn't fit. Wow. And I began exploring what that meant. So I had to start deconstructing my beliefs. I had to start exploring what does life look like outside of this belief structure.
Wow.
I questioned everything. I questioned politics, gender roles, all of the things that make us who we think we are, who we've been told you are. And so I had to do that. I was a new mom. I was married. And here I was questioning the entire foundation of my world. And at that time, there was no help. You would Google, I'm questioning my faith, or I'm questioning this, and it would just be, pray this prayer, read these Bible verses, talk to this pastor. And there were no answers. There was no research. There were no books or programs or organizations. And so I started navigating everything on my own as a first-time mom with a newborn, saying, how do I do this? And what do I do? I just know something is off. It was coercive. It was controlling. It was manipulative. And I don't know how to get out. And so I journeyed through.
So you're still in the cult at this point?
I had left because I'd gotten married. And but the church denomination that we were part of has now been labeled as a cult. But we moved out of that. My husband was he was saying, we need to move on. Something's not right here either. And
was he part of this as well?
Just part of the church denomination, but not part of the religious cult. That was part of it. So he's walked along this journey with me as well. And that led me into what is spiritual abuse, what is religious trauma. Those weren't words that were actively being used, but just from my own research and digging in and trying to go from counselor to counselor, trying to find some help. And that's what led me into understanding trauma, is my own lived experience, my own struggles of questioning everything I'd ever been taught, everything that I'd ever believed in. The identity I'd been handed. You were told you were this as a woman. You were told you could or could not do those things based on this or that. And I had to unravel it. I had to deconstruct all of those things. And that's what led me into understanding trauma and adverse childhood experiences and what bypassing looked like and what all of these things, this whole new vocabulary opened up to me. But again, in those recovering from cults or high demand religious groups, there wasn't a lot of help. And then that led me into, again, getting a little more education, doing a lot more research on my own. And that's what led me into the trauma space today.
Wow. Well, your story so far, this is why, people may wonder, why are you talking about this on Cultures? Well, your identity question is exactly what we talk about, that in-between space. People telling you who you are, who you should be, who they think you are, or even a country, a nation, your surroundings saying you're supposed to be like this.
Right.
And knowing that you are not that person, knowing that you are different. And that's the core of why this is such a great cultural conversation for cultures. Yeah. And I find it interesting. It's really interesting, the things that take us to our path, right? Yeah. So this led you down the path of learning and knowing about trauma, your lived experiences, and also your education at this point.
Yes. So
you use some terminology and that I'm sure people don't know what they are. So talk a little bit about what your expertise is and how you use that.
How I use that. Well, right now I work in 2 different spaces, which they come together in the family trauma or family betrayals is where they're joined. So the one is the religious trauma space and the other is the not parent expected space. And within religious trauma, there is kind of a spectrum. It might have been very clear this was a cult. We were brainwashed. We drank the Kool-Aid. There may be some very clear evidences of when you become an adult or when your eyes open to something's different. I can change my mind, and that's okay when I have new information. There may be that going on. There may be... you have to rephrase the question because I just lost my train of thought.
And actually, this is a perfect segue because, or this space is perfect because I was wanting to ask you to explain to people what exactly is a cult.
Okay.
And then we'll go back to the question.
Okay. What exactly is a cult? Well, the definition is being changed right now. Before, you would look at something that was very radical, something that seemed very extreme. And we would label that as, this is a cult. They obviously, again, the drink the Kool-Aid concept with David Koresh out in Waco. And we find these extreme examples and we say, well, that's a cult. But as there's people like myself who are speaking up about control dynamics within, whether it's a family, a religious space, a business, all of these things, we're seeing that the definition of cult is going to have to start changing. And there is a model from Steve Hassan. He's one of the leading cult experts in the world. And it's called the BITE model of authoritarian control. And that's a good way to start observing, am I in a cult-like space, a cult-like? And it's behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control.
Wow.
And so if you realize those areas of your life are being controlled, then you perhaps need to stop and pause and say, wait a second, is this a healthy environment? Or is there some high demand or high control things going on?
So you mentioned family dynamics. So can families be cult-like?
100%. Yes, there can be families that have cult dynamics in them as well. And if you'll note, there's a documentary came out called Shiny Happy People. It tells some of my story. I'm not in it, but that is part of the group, one of the groups that my family was involved with. And in it, one of the people even says that every father was turned into a cult leader.
Wow.
Because of this concept of authority and power and control over using scriptures or beliefs or even a cultural standard to, again, manipulate, control, coerce. Wow. And then so that's what I mean by, we've always seen it as an extreme, but now people are realizing there's micro cults.
Well, and if you think about it too, so if you look at the religious part of it, that may be the cult, and then they're speaking to the family, and in this case, the father is the head of the family. It's the hierarchy, just like an organization, any kind of organization.
Yes.
Wow.
Whether it's a business, a home, a nonprofit, a church, or a religious ministry, whatever it could be, that structure can just be copy-pasted.
So the initial question that led to, exactly, let's define what cult is, and especially in when you're speaking about the religious organization and the difference between, so let's define that as well, the difference between that organization and then, so it had a cult-like part within the organization, or was the whole religion a cult?
From my experience?
Yes, because you were saying that your husband was part of the religious organization, but not part of the cult.
Right.
Okay.
So my story is a little complicated. It's got lots of twists and turns. So 4 different religious cults impacted the foundation of my life.
Wow.
So the first one being a church where the pastor of that church became a cult leader, where he would shun people. So shunning, and he would have you stand up. If you do not agree with me, you are to leave this building and never come in again, and no one's allowed to speak to them. He would do things like that, even dividing my own family. And that was the first one. The second, again, there's another documentary about this one, but there had been a family who left a sect of Mormonism it was an extremist sect down in Mexico. They had come up and had been part of our church where we were. And then the father was killed in an atonement killing, and that impacted my family very greatly.
An atonement killing,
because the father had removed his family from that sect, and he must be atoned with blood. I was very young, but I remember all of the things as it impacted us in our community.
Wow.
Then we moved to another organization. I was a homeschool group called the Institute in Basic Life Principles, run by Bill Gothard, which is documented in Shiny Happy People. And we were also going to our own local church at the time we were involved in this program. And then our own local church is in Let Us Pray, another documentary about someday I will turn on the news and it will not be my life flashing before my eyes. But so I have all of these elements. So my husband was part of the church we would go to on a weekly basis, but not part of all the other stuff.
Wow.
And so that is another pattern that you will see, how they're all connected because of the power and control dynamic that exists. it attracts other power and control dynamics. So you will see people who've been involved in multiple cult-like situations or organizations, businesses, because that's that power and dynamic. But then we're also accustomed to that. We're used to being treated this way.
Right.
We're used to, oh no, I have to have these boundaries, these rules, these set of, guiding principles. And so that's why I encourage people, you need to stop and heal yourself and take all the time you need, because otherwise you will repeat that same pattern that you became accustomed to, and it takes longer to heal than you want it to.
Wow.
And so that's where it's going to take you some time, but it is so worth it, because otherwise 10 years down the line, you're going to realize you did the same thing, just in a different flavor.
In a different way. Oh, yes, I can understand that. So we were talking about your journey and your education, your background in this, and how that led you to where you are now. So you told us a little bit about the family dynamic, but then when did you decide to educate yourself on this? And then what has that led to?
Yeah, so I actually have my master's is in religious education from a university that was approved. And so I realized I'd become a young mom. I'd struggled through all the things myself. And again, I just had to go find resources. And so I started taking trauma classes. I was reading books on trauma. I was connecting with individuals who understood. I had to start building a community around me of people that got what I was talking about. Now, if you Google it, there's help. There's organizations, there's books, there's coaches, there's counselors, there's people that can help you. But 15 years ago, when my journey started, that wasn't there. Right. So I had to educate myself. I had to find those people, find those resources. That's what led me into, okay, I want to start helping others. I know I'm not ready yet to I'm not all the way healed, but it's the hand up and the hand down concept where I still need help, but I can help someone coming behind me. Okay. And that's what led me into getting 2 different life coaching certifications. While I continue being educated on trauma, going to conferences, taking classes, all those type of things.
So do you have a clientele that you work with to try to help them through their life trauma?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
How is that? That sounds like a very deep and heavy line of work.
Sometimes I need to take a break. You don't know what stories you will hear, the abuses that have been suffered. Sometimes it's just people searching for who am I? What am I going to believe? My family culture told me this. My religious culture told me that. The culture I'm in, the country I'm in told me this. And now I'm so confused because I thought the narrative I'd been given blended them all in this way. And now I don't know how to fit. And so when you do interact with someone who says, I think I was abused spiritually, I was controlled and coerced spiritually, I think I've had this form of trauma, I don't know what to do. When we start having those conversations, and to date, I have not, every person who I've spoken with, I've referred out to a licensed professional that specializes in whether it's anxiety or childhood abuse and neglect, whatever it is. But I'm kind of that first spot of, I need to feel safe, and I need to feel that somebody understands and I'm not crazy. Because that's the first thing. You're like, I'm crazy. It couldn't have been that bad.
Well, if everyone around you and the world around you and society all is telling you that you're supposed to be this way and you are this way, and you don't think you are, then of course that's crazy making.
Yeah.
So we'll go straight into your NPE story. One of the reasons, and we have other guests, and we'll have guests from time to time from the NPE Network who will be either in Cultures Print or on the podcast, etc. But a lot of times people find that they have cultural ties that they didn't know about, or ethnic ties that they had no clue about. Do you ever get involved with those types of things?
As far as within my position as CEO of the organization, yes.
Okay.
But we are set up at this point to be a peer-to-peer support organization. So people with the similar stories are supporting each other. We do have retreats, things along those lines that I help organize and plan, and we find the right people to come and speak to that if that's their experience or they are a professional in that field. And so I hear the stories, I meet the people, I watch what this has done to their lives.
Wow.
Sometimes it's a great positive impact. Sometimes it's devastating for them and their family based on their situation.
Wow. So, which leads us into your family NPE story.
Yes.
So originally I thought you were an NPE, but it's a family member that
Correct.
was an NPE, and that affected your entire family, including you.
Correct.
And that has led you or put you down the path to being head of NPE Network now.
Correct.
So tell us about that story and how it came about. I'm assuming it started with a DNA test.
Absolutely, it did. It started with a DNA test that kind of made our family freeze for a while. My aunt took a DNA test, as millions of people around the globe have done, and I do say millions. And she suddenly got these results that made it that her brother was not her full brother, and her sister's not her full sister. What is going on? Until the realization comes of, our dad is not my dad, which means my grandfather was not my aunt's biological father. And now we navigate this as a family. My grandfather had already passed. My grandmother had already passed.
Okay.
But you're looking at the scientific data that tells you your dad's not really your dad. And so then our family has to grapple with, what does this mean? What does this look like for us? And instantly, I just knew that my aunt needed support. And I was going to be there.
So that adds a whole nother dimension, right? When there's death involved, when you can't speak to the family members who could give you some kind of clarity, right?
Yes, and so we will never actually know the whole story. We can't. So my aunt has pieced information together. She's gone back to the place where she was born. She's talked to people. She's been able to do genealogy and connect with other biological family members. But because her biological father was also passed away, she was a little bit older when she found out. So
60, you said, right?
around 60, yeah.
Okay,
And
okay.
so she will never be able to get all of the answers, which then there's this open spot in your heart, like you can guess, we can fill in the blanks, but there's not absolute answer for that. Now, that's not always the case for people.
Right. So was the DNA how she was able to find her biological father? How
Yes.
did that go? Okay.
Yes.
And how did that go? I know he's passed, but there's his family.
Yes. So then it is a very delicate, sensitive dance that you must do. And that's part of why NPE Network exists, because with each person's story, how do we navigate this? Do I reach out to a new biological family? Do I tell my family at all? Yeah. How is this going to impact my kids? My grandpa now isn't my aunt's dad. So how is this? The ripple effect is quite large.
Well, and as you talk about your background, your trauma background and betrayal, I mean, if you decide to go now and speak with your new family, is your what was considered your family now feeling betrayed by you?
They can. But the bottom line is, you didn't conceive yourself. And so whether there was an assault, whether it was a consensual affair, whether it was a one-night stand, whether it was something that happened in college, you were donor conceived, you were adopted, every person's story is unique. And that's why we have to navigate it so carefully, because there are feelings of betrayal. There have been family secrets kept. Sometimes the whole family knew, but you.
Wow.
Sometimes nobody knew. And so it's a very, very careful process, because if you go in, you're the bull in the china shop that could just, but again, you didn't do this.
Right.
And that is a process that people have to work through. My aunt didn't do this, but the truth that is flowing inside of her veins, that is you can't dispute it.
Right.
It's what, 99% accurate, roughly. It's true. But that could have the domino effect of hurting people or empowering people. So, yeah.
So, a lot of people that I've spoken to, when they find out that their family wasn't necessarily their family or a parent wasn't their parent, often look back and say, well, I always felt this way, or there was a thing, or it didn't feel quite, and that could be nothing, because I'll tell you what, I feel that all the time, and it's clear that I am my parents' child. I mean, I look like both of my parents, and my siblings do as well.
Yeah.
But I've had people say, and sometimes I think to myself, like, are we in the same family? So do a lot of people end up feeling that way? Like, oh, I felt like something was off, or I always had these questions, or things like that?
I hear that all the time. Other leaders in our community, they hear it all the time. I've heard that story where I just knew. And it's that felt sense. It's something you feel it, but you don't know what it is until finally you know what it is. And then that's why I felt different, or that's why I looked different, but there were no answers. You may be the only one with dark hair and all your siblings have blonde hair, or you may be the only one with a different color skin, but nobody ever gave you answers. You just got that sense. And so, to my knowledge, there's no hard data or science behind all of that. I could be wrong, but we hear that a lot.
Over and over.
Yes.
There's also just, that innate sensing that we have about things. And sometimes, you can really feel when something is off.
Yes.
Wow. So in your family story, what did your aunt then do once she found out? And first of all, how long did it take her to get over the shock?
I don't know. I mean, I've heard other people's stories, and some can recover from it a little bit faster or get to an acceptance point a little bit faster. But it's a long process. And for her, she started a Facebook group because there was nothing. And then she started an organization. And because there was no help, she would Google, she would research, she would call around. Professionals didn't know what to do, The closest you could find for someone who would understand is a late discovery adoptee. So a counselor or networks who'd been developed to help people who discovered that, but that was the closest thing, but it didn't fully understand the experience. And so my aunt is the one who actually founded NPE Network. Yes.
And so she was the president before you. Now you're president, and why is that? What was the switch over there?
She has a full-time job. She's got a lot of family responsibilities, and it was just time. And it's been wonderful that she's trusted me with it, because again, I view this as honoring my grandmother's legacy. It is a way I see it as bringing honor to her, because my grandmother was one of the sweetest people ever. She loved helping people. She had dozens of foster kids. She liked to help people. She raised a handicapped daughter. She adopted one and has raised her. She was a very giving, loving person. And for me, I see it as my ancestor came before. Again, we don't know the whole story. But whatever it was, I get to continue this legacy of caring for people. It was from my grandmother to my aunt and now to me.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And it's just a beautiful legacy for me of, yes, Grandma.
So what was that journey? So I'm glad that she was able to throw her energy behind a group like NPE, and you reach tens of thousands of people in 40 countries around the world, right? How many people are in the Facebook group?
Currently, there's around 12,000.
Okay.
But the ripple effect, again, we've noticed, again, this is just our own observation, but there's about 50 people per NPE discovery that are
I
impacted.
can only imagine.
Your direct family, the biological family, were you at work when you've made the discovery and you froze, and your coworkers, so there's about 50 people. So if you take 12,000 and multiply that by 50, that's really the reach.
I mean, the impact, and then the impact goes on beyond that. It's kind of like our magazine, we might have a subscriber, but the formula is about 7 people will read from that publication of the one person. So similar impact and ripple effect. So she started the organization, and also, how did she tell her family? Your family?
I wasn't there. She told me over the phone.
Did she do it as a group or one by one?
My understanding is it was mostly as a group.
Okay.
And so, but with me, it was the telephone call. And it was yeah.
And how was it accepted or taken?
The family struggled with it. And as that's normal. Because
Of
first
course,
you
I
want
mean,
to see,
wow.
well, where's the proof? Like, what are you basing this on? And then could the science be wrong? Like, what margin of error is there? Or, maybe they just got it wrong. Maybe they just made a mistake. And so those are some of those first questions. It's kind of like the grief process of we're bargaining, and then we're in denial, and then we go back and forth. And so my family's reaction was a very common reaction of what we've seen. And so for me, through the phone call, I think it's because I understood the identity trauma of questioning who I was already, that when she explained to me, Grandpa's not really my dad, I was able to say, I know what it feels like to not know who you are right now.
Right.
And I just quickly, like, what do you need? I'm here. You're
Say,
still
how
my aunt.
healing is that? Oh, that's great.
You're still my aunt. Nothing's changing for me. How can we help? And again, every family member's reaction is different. Your biological family, some of them want nothing to do with you. Some of them will embrace you with open arms. It's a very scary process.
And why would you say, in the instances where people want nothing to do with you, why is that a choice? Especially, I mean, we're talking, in this case, someone later in life. So you spent a lifetime with this person.
Yeah. Because a lot of the times it depends on the story of your conception. Was there an assault? Was it an affair? Some families cannot handle the perfect polished image of dad or mom being tarnished. Some families are not equipped to handle mental health or family struggles. And this is a trauma for them too, because zooming all the way out to what is trauma is basically anything that happens where that is either perceived or a real threat and you don't have control. Again, that's zooming way, way, way out. There's a lot more to trauma. But when this happens, you are not in control of it at all. You took a DNA test, and here's the data. And now the family goes, we don't know what to do. And again, depending on the situation and all the things at play, they may feel like we're out of control. This is out of my control. And so sometimes going, no contact, don't contact us again, is their way of, yes. Yeah. Some families will explore the stories and they'll find out they love the person. Sometimes you may not want to be part of the new biological family. Sometimes, so there's, again.
I was just having pictures of, you find out you're from crazy people. You're like,
exactly.
Like, oh, God.
So that's why it's like, proceed with caution, because we gotta vet just because you're like biologically related, right?
And I apologize, no triggering for anyone.
Sorry,
Use of the word crazy, but from people out of the ordinary. How's that?
But ultimately, if you are ever contacted by someone who said, I discovered that your brother, your husband, your uncle, your grandfather is my biological father, or on the other mother, it's mostly common with fathers, just biologically. That's how it works. But yes, with mothers too, through donor conception, adoption, switched at birth, many different stories.
Switched at birth.
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
But when someone contacts you, ultimately what they really want to know is just some history. They want to see a photo. Do I actually look like my biological dad or my biological family? Is there any medical information that I really do need to know? Am I a carrier for something? Am I more prone to breast cancer?
Right.
And so ultimately, even if you are the biological family who's being contacted and your initial is, we don't want to know, I'm not sure what to do with this. They're not coming and asking to go into the family will.
Right. All right.
They want to know information about their identity.
Right.
And if nothing else, if you can give them that, here's a photo, there is medical or there is no medical, that is just a very human, respectful way to process this if you are struggling to give them that little piece of their identity.
Wow. And all of this, I mean, it really is about identity.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about your book, When Family Hurts.
Yes.
Right? So 30 Days to Finding Healing and Clarity. Yes. So where did this come from? Was this before the discovery?
This book came out of my own hurts, of course. And I know a lot of authors say it, but it's true. I wrote the book I needed but couldn't find at the time. And yes, it was after the NPE discovery in my family. Yes, it was after I recognized religious trauma and spiritual abuse was in my life. It was only published a couple of years ago. But I began realizing both of these worlds, it's the generational traumas. It's the family betrayals or feelings of betrayal. So that was the crossover, is the family. Because when you're raised in a religious home, it's the family that was teaching you these things, whether they were good intentioned or they were trying to be the high power control dynamic. And so it's a book that I wrote as a 30-day guide, because sometimes we're faced with situations like an NPE discovery or we recognize something was abuse in our family, and we have to make a decision quickly. And therapy is vital, but therapy takes time. And sometimes, especially if you've come from a dynamic where you're not allowed to feel, feelings are sinful or evil, or your family was toxic and made you shove everything down because they didn't know how to feel in a healthy way, I wrote the book so that in 30 days you can figure some of that out. What do I really need? What am I really feeling? Why is it this? What do I need to do to kind of help you put together a plan to understand yourself first, your own feelings, your own needs, and then you can make a more informed decision on how to navigate whatever family situation you find yourself in the middle of.
And where can people find the help of this book?
You can go to my website, my own personal website, which is RebekahDrumsta.com, or yes, it's over there on Amazon.
As everything is.
Everything is. Yes.
So now your aunt, how did she go about contacting her biological family?
Let me see if I remember, because it's not my own story.
Right. And we don't have to share it if it's something.
I know she has. I don't remember exactly how it goes about, but she was able to make connections with the biological family. I've met one of her biological sisters, a delightful person, wonderful person.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
That's wonderful. So your own family, however, you and your aunt, I'm assuming, are very close.
I would hope so, because we're doing this together.
Yeah, that was my thought. But you never know. It could be that you have similar goals, but not necessarily close. I mean, some families, that's the dynamic. And the rest of the family?
That is an interesting story. Yeah. Maybe we should just stop on that one.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And that's a good place to stop as well. I mean, I love the work that you're doing. I think you are uniquely qualified to be part of this, and that your aunt was so fortunate to have you in her family and have your background. And I can only imagine that call when you said, I get it, and what can I do, right?
I think I didn't understand the ramifications of it because it was still a new thing. Nobody, it's only been
it's DNA.
Since 2017,
yes,
18 is when this even existed. And so our organization is the first ever nonprofit of its kind to address this. We're the world's first and largest peer-to-peer support community for the NPE discovery. Also, if you're the mother of an NPE, the sister, the brother, we have a community for you. And so I love that, again, I get to pick up this gauntlet of I can continue this work that impacted my whole family and go forward with that. And because I know what it feels like to be the family member who goes, oh, this is really impacting us. There's some people that are okay with it, and there's some people who are not. Yeah.
All right. I'm so glad that you were here today. What a fascinating story. And I am actually on the board of NPE Network. So I'm excited to do that work with you all because the connections with TCKs and people with cross-cultural backgrounds is so fascinating. And this is something that's going to be needed more and more as we have discoveries with DNA.
Yes, I'm just finishing up. It's yet to be published, but it's waiting for publication. A study with McGill University on the impact on mental health for NPEs. And this is literally that intersection of ancestry, mental health, and bioscience.
Oh, wow.
And all three worlds come together and collide. And we're finding out about history, about everything, all in one little DNA test kit that you can go buy at Target.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much.
You got it. Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure to have you. You can find out more about Rebekah Drumsta at her website, RebekahDrumsta.com, and also find the NPE Network on Facebook.